Intelligent Ramblings with your host, Bill Lofton. Co-hosted by Gary Glenn and William Howington with help from John Cole.
Well, here we are, live on Intelligent Ramblings in 2025, our first webcast for the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
My
Happy New Year.
co-host, John Cone, up at the left, Gary Glenn up at the right, and bottom left is Mr. William Howington.
All right.
We are transitioning to a new platform that we'll talk about in just a minute. But right now, well, why don't we go ahead and talk about it right now? EV Mux, our new platform. So you can count on some bugs. You can count on us not recording something. We can count on the video being weird, and you can count on the audio being weird until we get it completely figured out. It's just the way it is. As Walter Cronkite, brain wasn't working there, used to say. Anyway,
that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. Anyway, I'm happy everybody's here with us, and let's get on to a little bit of news. Pacific Palisades fire is a demon, 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, and it's just pushing it down that mountainside, headed directly towards Los Angeles City. 25,000 acres have been affected. It's actually 5 different fires going on at the same time. And they're coming from different directions, but they all seem to be headed towards LA. It's 0% contained. And at this point, 35,000 people have been evacuated. But the loss right now is unbelievable. It's like somebody dropped a nuke on the Pacific Palisades.
Yeah, I got kind of a dog in that fight too. My son Mason is out in Los Angeles. He does not think his place is in any danger, but he's going to go stay with his companion, and who is even further away from the flames and surrounded by a lot more concrete and steel than Mason. But he said that it would have to. I think it actually got within a mile of him, one of the flames, before they beat that one back. But he told me today, I talked to him, and he said it would have to jump 8 lanes of an expressway, then maybe 6 more lanes to get anywhere close to him. But, you always want to err on the side of caution. So he got all of his mementos, his important papers, everything that he just can't stand to lose, and loaded it in his car and took off. So I haven't talked to him tonight, but I think he's out of harm's way.
Well, it's good to know he's out of harm's way, but I feel terrible that he's having to go through this.
Yes, absolutely. And even worse for the people that have already lost their stuff. There's been loss of life, loss of property, loss of irreplaceable stuff, and it's affected. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate if you're rich or famous or anything. If you're in its way, it just eats you up.
Yeah.
It's really something.
This thing about fire, it doesn't care what you are or who you are. There were a lot of cars on the expressway to where they tried to get out, and they got in a traffic jam and couldn't get out, and left their cars and started running and just trying to, and what they did was just outrun the fire. But they left their vehicles, and the emergency vehicles couldn't get through, so they had bulldozers coming in and pushing them out of the way.
Yeah, and there was one of the actors that had jumped in to help things out, and he told people, he said, if you're going to abandon your car, leave your keys in the car so we can move it if we can. Right now you're just blocking everything.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember who it was. I'd give him credit. I think he was in one of the police, maybe Steve Guttenberg. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
The Police Academy movies. I think that's who it was. I think that's who it was. But he was just saying, Don't leave your keys. If we can crank it and move it, we will. But if you just abandon your car without any way to move it, you're doing what you're talking about, Billy. Taking bulldozers, pushing them out of the way.
Yeah.
You may lose it anyway, so might as well leave your keys in it.
At least have a chance.
Yeah.
They were saying 80+ mile an hour winds are part of what's driving the fires to grow so big so fast.
Well, the Santa Ana winds, they hit like about it's almost some kind of a cycle. About every 8 or 10 years, I think. About every 10 years. They really, really pick up in intensity, and this just happens to be one of the years that it is really blowing hard.
It blows those embers from whatever's burning. It can blow it across the road easily and catch a house on fire across the road. So it's it's 0% contained right now. It's what the scary part is, and who knows where this fire's going to go and what it's going to do. We just don't know.
Well, President Trump wrote a letter there to Gavin Newsom talking about he wanted to allow the snowfall to run into LA there to bolster their water situation. And he said if he'd have done that, they'd have water going to the fire hydrants and enough water to contain this fire. But Newsom didn't go for it, and there you are. I read the letter that he wrote.
He wanted to do what with the snow?
He wanted to let all that snowfall and stuff be contained and run into LA so they could have water to combat these fires and things.
How is he going to get the snow from wherever?
The mountains.
Just.
Yeah. I don't know. You'll have to read the article.
I definitely going to have to read that article.
Yeah, I'd like to see how that would be planned to do it. They just need some. They've been in a drought situation out there for quite some time. It's the perfect storm of crap.
Well, they got a 1/16 of an inch of rain since May.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically a desert anyway. It's a tinderbox. I mean,
1,000 years from now, that's going to be the new Sahara. I mean, it's going to happen. California is parts of it are falling off. You've got the earthquakes that happen on a regular basis, and it's going to be a big one sooner or later, a real big one that devastates it like no other. That's one of the last places on planet Earth that I would live. Not to mention all the libtards that live out there. You know, I don't know what would be worse, the people or the weather.
Well, then you got the taxes.
Yeah, then the taxes.
Cost of living.
Cost of living, absolutely. And speaking of President Trump, one of his new ideas, he wants Greenland and he wants the Panama Canal. And he said he would not rule out using military options to secure them.
Well, yeah, that's outlandish, but the Netherlands basically own Greenland, but the Greenland people I don't think, have really been fond of that kind of rule.
Denmark.
So Danish rule, I don't think they're really fond of that, but they've already said it's not for sale, and I don't expect it will be anytime soon. There's a whole bunch of treaties down there with the Panama Canal. Reagan once talk about trying to acquire a better deal in the Panama Canal zone? That's after President Carter made the overtures to give it back to Panama, but we basically built it and run it, and I think we ought to get a better of a sweetheart deal out of it. I think that's maybe what Trump is. Sometimes I think, guys, he says, and I heard this from a Trump guy today, sometimes I think he says these outlandish things so that when they come back with a much milder compromise, that seems more palatable. Like, trying to buy Canada or something, and it's or trying to annex them as part of the United States. And their outgoing Prime Minister Trudeau said there's a snowball's chance in hell that would ever happen. Well, maybe he's trying to get more of a sweetheart deal with trade with
Yeah,
Canada. We've got the technology, we've got the manpower, they got the resources up there. So
and
maybe
he's
he's
throwing
trying
in,
to make that kind of deal.
and he's throwing in that the Chinese are the ones that are running the show down there, which is not true.
Not true.
And that's, I'm sure that part was to fire up his, I don't know what you call them, the followers of Trump. Um, that's
The
the nicest word.
Trumpians.
The Trumpians. He's trying to fire up the Trumpians by saying that the Chinese control it. I mean, I don't know about all that. But that's where we're at with that. John, what do you
Well,
think economically?
Didn't hear the last part, Bill. Sorry. What did I think about what?
Economically, what do you think is going on down there in the Panama Canal and with Greenland? You think it's going to enhance us economically?
I don't claim to understand his motivation for saying things like he says about Greenland and Panama Canal in Canada. Just to focus on Panama Canal for a second, I don't think that, well, the Panamanians control the Panama Canal, period. China doesn't have anything to do with it. In President-elect Trump's fevered brain, maybe they do. Or maybe he sees it as a way to keep his base stirred up. And at any rate, the Panama Canal is extremely valuable. And there is no way anybody's going to be allowed to upset that apple cart, the U.S. or anybody else. There are too many interests around the world that want that canal to stay open and for it to have the status it's got right now, which has been great, by the way. No problems, no worries since President Carter sent the treaty through Congress and Congress ratified it, however many years ago that was. But just economically, it's extremely valuable. And nothing Mr. Trump says is going to change the way that it's organized, owned, operated, funded. It's not going to change.
It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through the canal. It's really expensive.
It's a shipping expense. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to cross the ocean from China to the port of Los Angeles. It's a cost of doing business. And all he's done is point out that it costs what it costs. The rates haven't gone up significantly recently. No one's trying to gouge anybody. It just makes for good headlines and, for whatever other reason he might have to talk about taking the Panama Canal back over.
Well, didn't we build the damn thing?
Yeah.
Then why the hell would we give it away?
Because it's on their land.
Basically,
it's a sovereign nation.
Took a chunk out of their country, divided it in half, built a canal through it. All good. The end results of having the Panama Canal were good, but we ran over their rights as a country.
Well, I'm sure this has helped them a lot more than they realize. the amount of money that comes out of it.
I think they're fully aware of how much money that canal makes for them every year, every moment. It's done a lot of good things for the Panama.
Well,
And it's not like we don't have a presence there. There are military troops in bases in Panama.
Yeah, I almost got sent there.
We've had a presence there ever since Theodore Roosevelt, who, by the way, when he visited, caused a fashion sense to occur. You remember what it was? The Panama hat.
Oh, nice.
That's where it came from. Teddy.
He's the gift that keeps on giving.
No doubt. And the last thing that's talkable this week, remembering Jimmy Carter. President Jimmy Carter his reign as president was not marked by a lot of the Iran-Contra situation happened when he was in office, and that's what he's remembered for, the hostage.
The hostage thing. Yeah, Contra was under Reagan. But yeah.
That's what his presidency was remembered for. But the thing is, with Jimmy Carter was what he did after his presidency is what really matters. And he has been a worldwide phenomenon as far as what he has done for this planet in the last 40 years. He's been a worldwide ambassador for the United States. He's built homes by hand. You can see Jimmy Carter out there hammering a damn nail, you know. It's a good person.
Yeah. He generated some controversy when he was in office and some controversy when he was out of office. Even though he went around the world, a lot of people particularly on the far right were talking about he was just meddling. But he did a whole lot of good things too. I mean, there's no question about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I have my 2 cents worth in here in a little bit. So I'm going to talk about some of that.
All right. Well, talking about that, why don't we take a quick commercial break and we'll come back and hear Gary talk.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And Happy New Year, everybody. As I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about President Carter. But first of all, I want to touch on something else. I want to touch on that incident we had in New Orleans. Now, the late great commentator Paul Harvey would note that the person who perpetrated that in New Orleans, that truck attack and the subsequent shootout with police, he'd like me to mention his name. I will not dignify such a despicable and cowardly act with that response of his name. I have a hard time conceiving of that degree of anger and hatred. Most who worship God basically worship the same God. And I guarantee you, God does not want his children to treat each other in any such a way. I guarantee you that. Now, from that despicable and cowardly act of hatred and anger, I turn to someone who exemplified a level of care that very few achieve. Jimmy Carter, we just mentioned. Former Georgia governor and still the only president from our state. Died after being in hospice for many months. Lasted a whole lot longer than people thought he would. As a matter of fact, achieved something that very few people achieve worldwide, although more achieving it now, that is, to live to 100 years old, the longest living ex-president. He was no saint, but what he did have was a servant heart. He was a servant. And that life of service speaks volumes. And that's the type of service and the type of life that gives us hope. And we would do well to emulate. Now, he had his detractors, of course, much of that perhaps due to certain campaign practices. And that, of course, begs the question, what do you have to do to get elected in order to do what you consider to be good for most folks? In other words, does the end justify the means? That's an ongoing debate. We won't settle it here. But a common trope is that Jimmy Carter was a much better ex-president than he was a president. I think there's some truth to that, although that saying probably rankled Mr. Carter quite a bit. Now, remember, as president, he did negotiate a peace between Egypt and Israel, and he probably deserved the Nobel Peace Prize for that. Although he did get that prize later in life, he did get one, but I thought that was a singular achievement there. And whatever you want to say about that hostage crisis, which had a huge impact on his subsequent loss to Ronald Reagan in the presidential election, they all made it home alive. And he continued to work for peace and fairness in his post-presidency, not to mention his work for Habitat for Humanity that Bill's already talked about. You saw him there with a hammer and a nail in his hand. And he worked for Habitat into his 90s. And if the scales are tipped for Jimmy Carter, I think they tip in his favor. He's a Sunday school teacher, professing Christian, and I think he'd be pleased to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." So rest in peace, James Earl Carter, forever to be known as simply Jimmy. And that's my time out for this evening. Thanks for yours. I'm Gary Glenn.
Money with your host, John Cone.
Hi, everybody. Sounds like I'm on stage and ready to talk about economics and how economics affects our lives. One of the things I wanted to talk about was something Bill pointed out to me recently that has to do with credit collections, where I'm sure you're familiar with collection agencies. You hear lots of horror stories in the news about them, and they're for the most part justified. The video that Bill asked me to look at had to do with a credit validation letter that you can get from the collection agency that basically puts them on notice that you're aware that they have you in collections, and the person doing the video had two main points. One was to be sure to get this letter from the collection agency, and number two, don't pay them. Never pay them. Pay the party that the collection agency is working for. So if you have a hospital bill, don't pay the collection agency for your bill with the hospital. Pay the hospital. Don't send any money to the collection agency. Another thing I wanted to talk about really quick was back in 2024, in November, we set up a list of important economic indicators, and we're going to follow it. And I want to report in general that there hasn't been any real change in any of those numbers. Some have changed. For example, the inflation rate has stopped going down and then is now steady at about 3.7%, which is not bad. And it'll keep working its way down, probably more slowly than we would like. At any rate, the information about the credit validation letter and dealing with collection agencies and an update on our economic indicators will be on our blog at our website, www.intelligentramblings.com. And if you go to the blog page on the website, you'll see the table with updates and a few notes about the credit validation letter that we were talking about. Okay, my time is up. Let's move on to the next thing.
This webcast is brought to you by William Lofton Photography. They can be found at williamlofton.com. Offering event residential portraiture at williamlofton.com. This webcast.
Good evening. Tonight we'll talk about a couple of things, but we're going to start off with college football playoffs. And as you listen to this, listen to the rankings. Notice that rankings 1 through 4, that is the teams that were ranked number 1, 2, 3, and 4, are gone. They all lost in their playoff game. That bye didn't do them much good. And one of those teams, of course, was the Georgia Bulldogs. They looked completely rusty and out of sorts. But anyway, we have playoff games starting tomorrow, Thursday, January the 9th, as number 7 Notre Dame, who is 13-1, plays number 6 Penn State, 13-2. They'll be in the Capital One Orange Bowl at Hard Rock Stadium, somewhere outside of Miami. Friday, January 10th, number 8 Ohio State, 12-2, will play number 5 Texas, 13-2. And those 2 losses by Texas, of course, are against the University of Georgia. You know, we ought to be somewhere in here, but again, that lackluster performance cost us. And they're going to play at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic in Arlington, Texas. And the winners will meet January 20th at 7:30 on ESPN in Mercedes-Benz Stadium here in Atlanta. Ought to be a great matchup, whoever it is. There's a lot of good football teams left. Anyway, University of Georgia has lost players, half the team just about, either to the transfer portal, graduation, or leaving early to go to the NFL. Jefferson's Malachi Starks is entering the draft for the NFL, deservedly so. And also North Hall's Dan Jackson is graduating. That's half of our secondary. 2 damn good dogs they were playing in that secondary. The entire O-line is leaving. That's offensive line. And they're all pretty good. They just had a little bad luck there against Notre Dame last week, trying to protect our new quarterback. And the NFL playoffs are set as Kansas City in the AFC receives a bye with the best record in football, and the Detroit Lions receive a bye in the NFC. This Saturday, January the 11th, number 4 Houston Texans will play the Los Angeles Chargers at 4:30. At 8 p.m., it's number 3 Baltimore Ravens versus number 6 Pittsburgh. Then on Sunday at 1 p.m., the number 2 Buffalo Bills will play the Denver Broncos. In the NFC at 4:30, it's number 2 Philadelphia playing number 7 Green Bay. And nighttime at 8 p.m. is Tampa Bay, number 5, playing Washington, the Commanders. Tampa Bay is where we ought to be, is the Falcons. Monday night is the Rams versus the Vikings. On to something new here, the new TGL, Tomorrow's Golf League. This is something new. Pros, including Tiger Woods, they're hitting a golf ball into a big screen and playing a round of golf indoors in front of 1,500 people and millions, I guess, worldwide. Can you imagine this? Playing golf against a screen, and they're going to make money off of this. And you're paying for it, of course, if you got TV and you pay for a monthly cable bill or whatever. What will they think of next? Anyway, that's sports for tonight. Good night.
Well, hey there. I'm Bill Lofton, and it's my turn to talk about what I know about. And one thing that maybe nobody out there knows, or some of you do know, is the fact that I worked in commercial kitchens for 30 years. That's a long time. That's a lifetime. And I'm going to have a series of recipes, videos that I've made playing at this time slot every week. And I will put the video of the recipe on the webpage so you can watch it later. But without any other to do or whatnot, I will go ahead and start the recipe. Get your pencils out so you can write it down. But if you don't get it, check the website. It'll be there. First of all, we want to cut a whole chicken. Cut it down the back by the neck. Split it in half. Then you want to take that backbone out. Cut the leg and the thigh off. Cut those in half. Then take the wing off. Next you want to rough cut some vegetables. Onions, celery, and carrots. That's the Holy Trinity. Got to have that in a good soup. Next, add a tablespoon of oil to the pot. Add your onions. About a teaspoon of dry thyme. Let that cook together till it starts turning brown. Add the rest of your vegetables. Cook them together for about 6-7 minutes. Then you want to add your chicken. Stir that around real good. Now you want to add water. You want to cover it and have about 1 inch of water above the chicken. Cook it for about 45 minutes to an hour. Then you strain it off. Save that stock. It's important. Take your chicken and you let it cool down. Now take that stock that you saved. Break your fettuccine about 2 inches. Let that cook. You'll get some flavor in your noodles that way. Strain them off, let it cool. Now we're going to clean our chicken. Take the bones out, remove all the skin, then break it up by hand. Doesn't have to be too small. Now we're going to add that chicken back to that stock that we saved again. And the noodles. Then we'll add some brunoise or small cut celery and carrots to it, which will add flavor and color. Hope you enjoyed learning how to make chicken noodle soup. And join us next week when we learn how to make tomatoes. Well, here we are back for our concluding thoughts or conclusion of the show. I want to say thank you for those that joined us tonight. We definitely appreciate you coming in and watching us. I want to apologize for any of the blips and blurbs that may have happened. John, you need to remind me to lower my camera settings. So
Okay.
I was probably 6 seconds behind what my mouth was doing. But like I said, this is a new platform, and we're trying to figure it out. We like it a lot better, and hope you do too. And we just lost Gary. But everybody get ready because we got a winter storm coming here in North Georgia. We're looking at about 2 to 4 inches of snow, and you know what that means. They shut down everything. So go get
Hmm.
your bread and your peanut butter tomorrow and get ready for the storm. If you have to get out in the storm, please be careful. Always carry a coat, a serious coat in the car with you just in case you decide to slide off the road and have to walk home. Guys, got
Yeah.
anything? Any concluding thoughts?
Flashlights and some water. Load up that car.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
While we're on the topic, that reminds me of Snow Jam '82. Uh, I was living in Jonesboro at the time and working in uh, Stone Mountain, and actually not Stone Mountain. It was kind of more like Chambly. But at any rate, the storm came into the city from the west, and um, I we left work. We didn't get out early. We left at the regular time, and by that, most of the damage had been done. And I was trying to make my way through the city, and um, didn't make it. Had to park my truck in a church parking lot and uh, walked to a friend's house who lived. Um, where was that? Somewhere in Virginia Highlands. Anyway, never made it home that night, and it's don't mess around with it. Like they were saying, pack your car with good stuff, including decent pair of walking shoes. Uh, Not a
Yeah,
bad
don't wear
idea
your
to
high
have.
heels.
Yeah, don't do that. Thanks to Gary for his great comments about Jimmy Carter tonight too, and Bill. Your recipe looks awesome. Can't wait to try it.
Yeah, I was making that soup for a sick friend. I thought I'd video it. Like I said, next week I'm going to teach you how to make a tomato basil sauce, which can be used on just about anything.
Andrea had a comment about your chicken soup. Did you see her comment? She said, "Bill, my Jewish grandparents would have been proud of your chicken soup."
Oh, I didn't see that, but I appreciate it, Andrea. Um, let's see here. Uh, I absolutely appreciate that remark. That means a lot. Grandmothers
Yeah, it
is
looked
all,
good.
grandmothers is always the best. Uh, I still remember my grandmother making banana pies. Every time we'd go to her house, we'd get banana pies and chocolate pies. And it was the best chocolate pie I ever ate, and I still hadn't eaten any of that's got good. Well, I hope everybody has a good week, and we'll see you back here on Intelligent Ramblings on the 15th. Everybody have a good week.
Awesome.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Good night. Uh, Almost good night. How about now? Good night.